I tell you, no matter how long I've known this.
Why we got company back to big story?
And you're in church.
It's okay. That's all right. That's all right. Let me also recognize Joyce Smith, who is with the Democratic State Central Committee. She's in presence.
I make certain she stepped out on me.
The phone holder.
What's that? What I get for following your instructions? That's all right.
Because we get introduced so seldom.
That's true. In any case, you doing this?
That's what I'm talking about.
You doing it?
You want me to?
Yeah.
No, I think you're the man.
You sure?
I'm your special assistant.
Okay. We were debating who was going to do it. First of all, if you're looking, brother, I don't have any money in this. If you check that phone, Flowers Company, if you check that, that's mine that was doing that ring. I just didn't get over there. All right, thank you. I don't understand how somebody can be in a position of power and influence and take a year to get to our organization, Doc. How do we work that out? Took 12 months to work this out. And I mean, I'm supposed to have the ability to talk to him, pick up the phone, have lunch. We see each other, and people say, they act like they're buddies. They ain't no, but I happen to know the man. If I happen to tell you he's the best Perry Mason I know, true. If I happen to say to you that he's a genius at what he does, true. If I happen to tell you he's the present state's attorney for the city of Baltimore, he is indeed my friend, and I'm so proud of his work thus far, the Honorable Gregg Bernstein. Show him some love, guys.
Well, it is an honor to be here. It is the first time that the senator asked me to come, and of course I immediately said yes, as I do to every request that he makes of me. The National Action Network was, for those of you who don't know, was formed by the Reverend Al Sharpton in 1991. And the first person he asked in the city of Baltimore to head up the local chapter here in Baltimore was your own Senator Larry Young, and he's held that post now for, I guess, 20 years. 20 years, which is a long time. Sure. So I do think that the time has come, given all the great work that the senator has done, to pass the torch a bit, and I can't think of a better person to assume that mantle than Mr. Doc Cheatham. So hopefully you have Doc, you have very big shoes to fill.
Real big.
But hopefully you'll be able to fill them. I'm a big admirer of Reverend Sharpton. I did have the privilege of hearing him speak at an event here at New Shiloh a number of years ago, and I still remember it. This is a terrific organization. I often say when I speak to groups that it's important that people stay in their lane, as I like to say, because as the state's attorney, my responsibility is to fight crime, is to prosecute violations of the law. But that only gets you part of the way. I mean, we can reduce the crime rate, we can make the city safer, which to me is vital to building our city and making it the great place that it once was and still can be. And it's why I ran for this office in the first instance, because I feel so strongly that public safety is almost an inalienable right for everyone. It doesn't matter where you come from or what part of the city you live in or what your neighborhood is like. But we can hold ground, we can only get so far, but unless we get the involvement of organizations like this and people like you and all the great work that Delegate Mitchell and Delegate Stukes and Delegate Oaks are doing to try to create educational opportunities, employment opportunities, things of that nature, we're treading water to a certain extent. So I think it's great that this organization exists. I wish there were more people here tonight. And hopefully under Doc Cheatham's leadership, we'll generate more people, and I'll say it publicly, I'm happy to come anytime you like. I mean, as Doc knows, and Larry knows, I've tried to be as transparent as I can and as accessible. We Doc and I always don't agree about things and decisions that we make, but that's how our system works. And as long as we have a dialogue and try to get to yes, as I like to say, I think we can continue to make the advancements that we've made. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the things that we've done just in the first year, and I'm happy to take any questions if time permits, if Doc and the Senator feels it's appropriate. For those of you who don't know, I've been the state's attorney now for 1 year, and in that time it really has been a bit of a whirlwind, but we've done a number of things. And just reviewing some of the highlights, last week, for example, after about 6 months of research and work, we've initiated our community prosecution model. Now, what that means is this, that the state's attorney's office, like most prosecutors' offices, has the kind of traditional divisions that you all are familiar with: a general felonies division, a narcotics division, a special firearms division, misdemeanor divisions, and the like. But I felt that my prosecutors within those divisions were just prosecuting cases, not prosecuting defendants, and more importantly, not understanding the relationship and the impact that those cases were having on the communities in which the crime occurs. So we have dismantled all those divisions, and we've completely reorganized the office. And it's really going to be a sea change in the way in which the state's attorney's office operates, because now what we have done is we've divided the city into zones, 3 zones that match the various police districts. Zone 1 is the eastern, southeastern, and northeastern police districts, the area covered by those police districts. Zone 2 is the central, western, and southern, or the areas covered by those police districts. And Zone 3 is the northwestern, northern, and southwestern areas covered by those police districts. We spent a lot of time researching and the like to determine whether those were the appropriate areas given crime trends and the like, and we found that to be the best way to do it. Because what we have found is that most crime is geographically based, and by that I mean, for the most part, people who commit criminal offenses tend to stay in the same geographic areas. So we're trying to capitalize on that, so to speak, and be much more strategic and focused in the way in which we prosecute cases. So now you will no longer have narcotics, just a narcotics prosecutor who on Monday has a case involving a defendant from the western side of town, and then the next day a case involving a defendant on the eastern part of town. There's no kind of strategic or strategy associated with that. There's no kind of intelligence building with that. Now you're going to be, my prosecutors are going to be what's called zone prosecutors. And they're going to be assigned to one of these 3 zones that I described. And working with their other colleagues within the zone, we think they can be much more efficient and effective in prosecuting crime, because they will be able to work more closely with the detectives and the officers who are in those particular precincts on a more regular basis. They also will get more connected and involved with the communities in which they are responsible for, because they'll have a better understanding how crime is impacting on that particular community. There will be more intelligence sharing. We've created a special new position called the community prosecutor for each of the zones, whose sole responsibility is to engage in this kind of information sharing, trying to connect the dots so that we can understand better why crimes occur. I mean, a good example is, take for example, we all know, the Pennsylvania corridor has been somewhat of a problem with regard to drug dealing. So suppose you got a classic case at Pennsylvania and Gold where the officers arrest 2 people who are engaged in a hand-to-hand buy involving narcotics. Well, historically what would happen is the buyer who bought the narcotics would be charged with possession, and he would go to district court. The seller or the dealer might get charged with a felony, and he would go to circuit court. Perhaps there was a person who was acting as a lookout standing nearby, and they found out that he had a gun. He was a prohibited person. He couldn't possess a firearm. So he gets prosecuted by our firearms unit. And maybe this dealer is involved in a turf battle with another crew that's fighting for that area, or turf, so to speak, in terms of their drug dealing. And maybe there's a shooting a couple days later, a retaliation. That might get to a different division. So you see the problem there. There's no kind of interaction, there's no kind of connectedness. Now, all of those cases that I just described would stay within Zone 2. And so you've got the same prosecutors handling all the cases and understanding why these cases occurred. So these offenses occurred. So we are very excited about this. We think it's going to make a real difference. About 6 months ago, we launched our major investigations unit. What the data shows is that Most of the violent crime that occurs in the city is committed by a relatively small number of people. So if we can be more strategic and intelligent-based in identifying these individuals and building strong cases against them, I think we're going to have a very dramatic effect on the violent crime that occurs here in the city. We've recruited a terrific young guy from the U.S. Attorney's Office, my federal counterparts, where I actually used to work long time ago, who's running this division. We've taken about half a dozen of our best prosecutors, and we've targeted them, or assigned them, excuse me, with focusing on building investigations, building cases against these repeat violent offenders. Now, we prosecute about 50,000 cases a year in Baltimore City, so obviously we can't exercise that kind of strategic attention, so to speak, on every case. But for these cases we can, because these, in my view, are the important ones. Because until we get a handle on these repeat violent offenders, and again, as I mentioned, it's a relatively small number, then we're not going to really make the kind of difference that I want to try to make Baltimore a safer place. So we're very excited about that as well. But, as I mentioned, those are just a very small part or percentage of the cases that we prosecute in the state's attorney's office. And we have a large number, of course, many of which are in the district court, that involve not violence, but nonviolent offenses that involve drug possession, solicitation, prostitution, those types of offenses. And I believe strongly that we need to figure out ways to avoid, wherever possible, conviction and incarceration for these individuals. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the United States has the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. We incarcerate more people per capita than any country in the world. But yet, I don't think anybody would say that we've eliminated crime. So that should say something to you, right? People should say, well, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? What are we doing wrong? And I think that what we need to do is to be more focused on these large percentage of cases that involve non-violent offenders. I mean, if there's violence involved, if there's a threat to public safety, that's something where I draw the line. And that we have to prosecute aggressively for all the reasons that I stated. But for those individuals who, because of a drug problem, because of a financial problem, an economic problem, are getting involved in criminal activity and are amenable to some kind of treatment or some alternative services, we need to explore that. And we have multiple problem-solving programs in courts that we're expanding and pushing. We have our early resolution court for people that get arrested for low-level type offenses to avoid conviction. We have our prostitution diversion program, which is a terrific program because, look, no one's going to say that people engage in prostitution by choice, right? They don't do it by choice. They do it out of necessity because they have a drug problem, an economic problem. So it doesn't do you any good to arrest people for prostitution, have them sit in jail for 48, 72 hours, have them released because they're just going to go right back on the street. So what the prostitution diversion program does is it tries to break that cycle. And it gets people who qualify much needed services so they don't continue to reoffend, as we like to say. We have our drug court program, and these are all programs that we're continuing to work on to expand to avoid people getting saddled with convictions and records and then have all the problems that Delegate Stooks was talking about. Because I think that one of the things that people are not focusing on enough, Delegate Stooks is, but that most people are not focusing on are this reentry issue and what do we do with ex-offenders. Because it really does become a giant scarlet letter that you're wearing for the rest of your life. It limits your job opportunities, it limits your educational opportunities. So we need to figure out ways in which to limit the situations in which people are forced to have a criminal conviction. That's what we're working on very strongly. So there is kind of a yin and a yang, kind of a schizophrenic way in which we're approaching things in the state's attorney's office because, as I mentioned, on the one hand, we're being very, very aggressive when it comes to violent crime, again, for the reasons that I stated. But yet, on the other hand, we need to look for alternatives to conviction and incarceration for these kind of nonviolent, low-level type offenses, which really make up most of the work that we do in the state's attorney's office. We've also reconstituted in the last year our police misconduct unit. We've renamed it, and we brought in a terrific young lawyer from the private sector to run it. It's now our police integrity unit, and we're much more focused and organized in meeting our ethical obligations in terms of providing information to defense lawyers in criminal cases where there are officers who have been charged with particular offenses. And more importantly, we are aggressively investigating and where necessary prosecuting allegations of police misconduct. We do have to work with the police on a regular basis to build our cases. It's hard, it's a very difficult thing fighting crime. If we don't have cooperative relationships with law enforcement, it's just not going to happen in terms of being successful. But yet at the same time, we have an obligation to the public to, where we see or get allegations of criminal activity or violations of the law by members of the police department, that we can proceed against them. We're doing that. We're being very aggressive about that. We also have a brand new conviction integrity unit, because you've probably read about this in the papers, seen some of it on the news. In the last few years, you're seeing more and more cases where incarcerated defendants are filing claims for based on actual innocence because they want to try to get DNA testing or other forensic identification or forensic evidentiary techniques that were not available at the time the person originally went to trial. And we think it's very important that we preserve, where appropriate, the integrity of the conviction, but yet at the same time make sure it was based on quality, reliable evidence. And so by having an independent division to focus on those cases, we can take an objective view and give people the fair look at it that they would like. We've improved technology in the last year in the office, which of course is vital to our operations. We've brought it, even without getting any new budgetary information, any new budget funds or the like, we've brought in new computers, BlackBerries, things of that nature, and we're using data in a strategic way to make ourselves more efficient in the courtroom. We've also reorganized our communications department so that now we have a much more direct access to the public in terms of providing information about particular cases. One of the people from our Community Affairs Department, Tony Savage, is here tonight if anybody wants to talk to him afterwards about some of the programs we have to offer. But most importantly, what we're trying to do there is to be as accessible as possible so that people in the community, if there are particular cases that they want to track because they have a real impact on the community, they can reach out to us. We'll show you how to track it online if you like, but if you'd rather not use the computer and you just want to know, we can provide that information. We're also working with communities throughout the city to prepare what's called community impact statements for particular cases, that have that kind of impact on the community, so that when it comes time for sentencing, we've done a number of these, when the community submits this community impact statement to the judge when it comes time for sentencing, I can assure you that the judges take a lot of interest and they sit up and they look at it. And I think it's important for judges to know the impact of cases on particular communities. Well, that's just the first year. And there's actually a lot more, but I won't go on and on. But I think the point is, the last thing I would say, and again, I'm happy to take any questions, and I mean, and the senator knows this. I really am pretty transparent. I mean, there's no other agenda. It's not about trying to do something else or trying to be something else. As I said in the beginning, I just think that people their quality of life, no matter what neighborhood you come from, is just not going to be very good if you don't feel safe in your home and in your community. And I don't care what community. I mean, I go all over the city to neighborhoods. I go to a lot of community meetings and I talk to people in small groups like this, and they say to me, you're the first person that's ever really come to talk to us. But I think it's important. And I think that until we get a handle on that, and until people start to feel safe, all the kinds of things that you hear Delegate Stutes talk about, and Delegate Mitchell and Delegate Oaks, I mean, they're just not going to happen, because we've got to start with that and then move from there. Thank you all very much.
All righty. This way first. And Delegate, do you want to be first?
I just wanted to ask them to rename the zones that you were talking about.
Yes, sir.
In the 9 police districts. Do they have a name?
Well, Delegate, it's funny you asked that, because we had a lot of discussion. I wanted to call them colors, but I got voted down on that. And then someone suggested that we name them after the 3 district courts. Because if you notice, for those of you that have a little bit of familiarity with this, to a certain extent, the districts, the zones match the 3 district courts, Wabash, North Avenue, and Southern, but they don't match them up 1-to-1. So we're just calling them numbers. It's just Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3.
Well, do me a favor.
Yes, sir.
Who's in Zone 1?
Zone 1 is the area that is covered by the eastern, northeastern, and southeastern police districts.
Southeastern. Okay,
Zone 2 is the area covered by the central, western, and southern police districts.
Okay.
And Zone 3 is the area covered by the northern, northwestern, and southwestern police districts. And if anyone, if you just go online to either our website or the police department's website, you can see where the various police districts are. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's my understanding, first of the month, 2 Jewish boys will go on trial for attacking an African American.
Correct.
This trial has been postponed 3 times in the last 2 years. And I'm under the understanding that it was the defense that postponed it all 3 times. And I was wondering if you knew offhand the three things that would cause the postponement.
Yes, sir.
And if you don't know, I can call your office tomorrow and maybe you can give me
No, sir. Yes, sir. No, I do know. First of all, the case has been pending for a year, not 2 years.
Okay.
That's number one.
Okay.
The case happened in, I believe, around November of 2010, so a little more than a year. The case has been postponed 3 times. The first time, the defendant's lawyers came in and said they needed more time to prepare for trial. And if I can just digress for a moment, if you'll indulge me, this is a reoccurring pattern that we often see in the Baltimore criminal justice system, where defense lawyers, and I got to be frank with you, prosecutors too sometimes, will ask for postponements to try to delay, and because they need more time to prepare, for example, either legitimately or not. And I feel very strongly that, and I know this is a cliche, but justice delayed is really justice denied. But more importantly, from a practical standpoint, cases don't get better with age.
Right.
From the prosecutor's standpoint, they get worse because witnesses' memories fade. It becomes more difficult to find witnesses. You get witness fatigue because witnesses are lay people and they don't have to come to court, right? So they're not, invested in the system the way the prosecutors and police are. So that is something we're really working on. The second postponement and the third postponement were both at the defense request because one of the defense lawyers is ill. One of the defense lawyers who represents one of the defendants has an illness, and she got a postponement the second time and then came in the third time and asked for another postponement. Now, the new trial date, again, as you described, is February the 1st. I can tell everyone that at the last postponement hearing, when it was postponed the third time, the judge made clear to her that if she wasn't available, she had to have another lawyer on standby because, we need to get this case resolved.
That's what I was wondering. That was going to be my next question, because I've been in the courtroom a few times myself, and I've always noticed that there would be more than one lawyer on major cases. And for one lawyer to be sick is really unacceptable.
You are preaching to the choir. And we tried to say that on the second postponement request, and the judge didn't do it, but now this third time, he did agree with us. And he said to the lawyer, look, defense counsel, if you're sick, you're sick. I mean, we're not, going to hold that against you. But you can't just keep postponing the case because you're ill. So if you're not ready for trial on February the 1st because you're ill, you got to have somebody. And we have said each time, I have one of my best prosecutors working on this case, by the way, each time we've said we are ready to go, and we'll be ready to go on February the 1st.
Good evening.